What exactly was the issue? What were the statements made by Honorable Commerce Minister? How far from reality were his statements?
We should not be content with this 10-minute delivery apps when the world is racing ahead with deep tech like AI and Semicon.
We'd like to know from you, how do we differentiate deep tech startups from consumer-driven startups?
But most of our startups are basically the basic startups or not the deep tech startups. See, deep tech startup is something like a breakthrough, a technological breakthrough, which is path breaking.
What can India do to give a boost to this deep tech sector or deep tech domain?
The difference is, let's say, we use this term ecosystem. The Chinese have a very elaborate ecosystem which nurtures these startups. Let's say when Pakistanis are discussing their cricketing team, so everybody is saying that we have a lot of talent and talent. Merely talent will not take you anywhere. Talent has to be nurtured, then it becomes a skill.
Hello and welcome to the Perspectives by VisionEye, in which we offer in-depth analysis of important issues concerning India and the world. Recently, the Union Commerce Minister made a remark which has actually disappointed many Indian entrepreneurs. This happened at the Startup Mahakumbh, and his remarks revolved around the ordinariness of Indian startups. Now, it may seem slightly counterintuitive because India's startup ecosystem is the third largest in the world. So let's try to judge, rather know and understand the merit in those remarks made by Honorable Commerce Minister of India. For that, today we have with us three eminent faculty members of VisionEye: Brijesh sir, Sudhir sir, and Aditya sir. Let's know from them about the importance of this issue. So let's begin this session with a question that we'd like you to answer. What exactly was the issue? What were the statements made by Honorable Commerce Minister? And how far from reality were his statements?
Yes, Chiranjeet. What did he say? Our Minister Piyush Goyal said, दुकानदारी ही करेंगे हम या फिर विश्वव्यापी भारत की पहचान भी बनाएंगे हम. So this was the statement made by our Minister Piyush Goyal. So what does he meant by this statement? So he wanted to convey we should not be content with this 10-minute delivery apps when the world is racing ahead with deep tech like AI and semiconductors. Also, he added that we have unicorns in this delivery, food delivery, grocery deliveries. And then he questioned also, how many deep tech startups do we have which have global impact? So this was the statement made by the minister. If we read the statement, if we interpret the statement, so we can say it is not the dismissal of startup ecosystem of India. Like what delivery apps, what this grocery apps they are doing. What he wanted to convey, he was trying to challenge the ecosystem of this startup ecosystem of India. He just wanted to say, like, what we are doing is good, but we should go beyond it. We should broaden our ambitions. That is what I think he wanted to convey through his statement.
Thank you, sir. Now, Sudhir sir, I have this question for you. For example, India's startup ecosystem is always studied or analyzed vis-a-vis the Chinese counterpart. Now, there has been a complaint that India's startups, the Indian startups, they're not driven by deep tech, the deep tech domain. Rather, they're mostly consumer driven. As Brijesh sir mentioned, deep tech startups may be the need of the time. Now, we'd like to know from you, how do we differentiate deep tech startups from consumer driven startups?
Yeah, Chiranjeet. India basically is the third largest ecosystem, but most of our startups are basically the basic startups or not the deep tech startups. Then how do we look at a deep tech startup? See, deep tech startup is something like a breakthrough, a technological breakthrough, which is path breaking, and it has a wider impact in the long term. And for example, when we talk about the defense startups or startups related to the semiconductors or even quantum encryption. So these are the startups which revolutionize the world. So if you look at China, the way China has grown and China has become independent, I think one of the major factor is also this deep tech startups in China. They were able to build that ecosystem in China itself. And when we talk about consumer driven startups, these are basically less technology driven. And more importantly, they are good. They create employment, but at the same time, there's nothing like a technological revolution. For a country like India, if we want to move from a lower middle income to a higher middle income and subsequently a high income country, what we require is basically the three stages. We call it as a 3I strategy, where we have investment coming in first, then infusion, and then comes innovation. So infusion is where countries sign technological agreements with other countries, like the semiconductor technologies, etc. This is how South Korea has grown. South Korea has learned the semiconductor technology from Japan, especially when Japan was using the same technology for televisions. And the same technology was used by South Koreans to make mobile phones, and that's how Samsung has emerged. And these deep tech technology initially comes through first learning the technologies from outside, and then we start developing an ecosystem that is basically quite innovative. That means innovation comes at a later phase after the infusion is done. Probably India's case, we have done the investment part, and still we are focusing on the investment only. But what we are missing out is the infusion as well as the innovation, or creating that ecosystem which is required for deep tech startups, which are more complex and path breaking.
Thank you, sir. Now, Aditya sir, as Ramsudhi sir said that India lacks innovation, although investment is there to a certain extent. What can India do to give a boost to this deep tech sector or deep tech domain?
So, as Sir rightly pointed out, the difference is, let's say, we use this term ecosystem, that Chinese have a very elaborate ecosystem which nurtures these startups. I'll give you an analogy. Let's say when Pakistanis are discussing their cricketing team, so everybody is saying that we have a lot of talent and talent. Merely talent will not take you anywhere. Talent has to be nurtured, then it becomes a skill. For skill to be pursued as a vocation, you will need some supporting systems. Supporting systems are basically the pillars of the economy, the foundation of the economy. Pillars in the sense that things that will not budge or that can take some losses and stride. So these are the big firms in the country. The government is the biggest firm, obviously. Yes, the big firms in the country, these are those pillars of the economy. So unless we have these big pillars that are able to take such decisions, okay, we are going to invest in these systems, we'll never have that ecosystem. Continuing with my example of cricket, BCCI had to take a decision, okay, we have to start IPL. That nurtures talent that is present in the country into skill that can go on to perform really well in multiple tournaments after that. So that is kind of the system that we need. So given that, let's say we have that in sports or let's say in cricket, we need such a system, some big players to take those decisions. It's not merely about, let's say we have skilled people, educated people, our talent is leaving the country. We have to retain that talent over here. It will not be retained when some individual tries to do something, some startup thing. It will be retained when we have that support system, those big pillars that nurture these talents. So that is what is missing. The Chinese have so many people that have left China, but now they are no longer leaving. As they are leaving, I'm sure, but now many of them stay back. That is what contributes to, that is that infusion state that Sir talked about. Investments we have, infusion and innovation, that is the next stage. And that will come when we are able to build those pillars, and those pillars are willing to take those risks.
Thank you, sir. Ramsudhi sir, as Brijesh has said that we have already started focusing upon deep tech based startups and India is doing well. But when will the time come that such tech based startups become the face of the Indian startup ecosystem?
First and foremost, I'll start with the mindset of the startup owners in India. When we look at mindset of the startup owners in India today, it is when they will get out of the startup. It is not the passion that is driving them. Probably it is the money. Money is very important, but probably a startup owner should be looking for a passionate aspect to work for, because deep tech startups take longer period. You can't get in and sell the company in 1.5 year, 2 years, make money. So probably one is the mindset of the startup owners, where not just the profit alone or quick profits, I mean by quick profits, by selling it off to somebody, rather some passion drives you with respect to technology. So this is one important aspect. Second important aspect is the R&D spending. So suppose India is spending less than 1% of its GDP on R&D, whereas countries like China are spending more than 2.4. Now the problem here is R&D is not just about government. R&D spending can be done by private also. So the ecosystems will be developed when there is a system that has been built where the private players also start spending on research and development. So this is another important factor, because without a vibrant ecosystem in place, spending on deep tech startups will become difficult. Third important aspect is doing business fundamentals without red tape. So suppose if there is a startup owner who's looking to start a company related to semiconductors. Now, if the application is stuck in the government offices for beyond a certain period, this will discourage people in terms of taking up such huge risk, because there's a huge cost coming up, including the opportunity cost for the startup owner. So that what facilitates these startups would be the doing business fundamentals. Government should be able to create that environment so that the startup owner also feels very confident to put in so many years of effort with respect to such startups. Of course, government has to focus on deep tech funding, which is very important, especially when it comes to, as sir was mentioning, space technology. But suppose you want to get into AI, robotics, and semiconductor technologies, so these are all capital intensive. So they require huge amount of funding support. So unless and until funding support is there, wherever we do not have the technology, probably government should support in terms of signing technology agreements with other countries in the initial phases till the time ecosystem develops. So there should be a starting point where we infuse technology, and that should be facilitated by government policies. So that's very important for the startup owner. So here, going by the regular startups, there's nothing wrong. It's creating some employment. But simultaneously, I think deep tech startups requires a lot of courage and passion, along with governments, support systems, and ecosystem being developed. So when all these things fall in place, then only probably India can thrive and become a upper middle income country soon through these startups. So India's GDP is dependent on the startups. Employment is dependent on startups. And India becoming real Atmanirbhar. So when I say real Atmanirbhar, today China is able to counter US because it has all these EV technologies, and even it is good, it has already created the ecosystem. So that's very important. So real Atmanirbharata comes up when our startups fly, and especially deep technologies, these deep seed startups start up. So that's what I believe.
Thank you, sir. You actually gave us a very honest yet clear picture of what the exact situation is. Now, Aditya sir, a question for you. For example, the inertia among the Indian investors as regards deep tech is quite obvious, as sir mentioned. But if we assume that somehow it's going to get some boost, the deep tech segment, is it going to come with a price? Because we already have a dichotomy, deep tech versus consumer driven. Can both the startups or the startup types get equal boost, or the growth of one will be compromised because of the growth in the other?
Okay, that's nice. I'll give a few examples to answer that question. The first example is that of Amazon. So Amazon, in around 1998 or something, somewhere like that, Amazon is, let's say Flipkart, it's basically a seller, e-commerce seller. Today, e-commerce contributes obviously a main part of revenue for Amazon, but the main revenue today comes from the cloud services. Where does Amazon get its clouds revenue from? Let's say e-commerce becomes kind of, as our Honorable Minister said, dukandari wala part. And let's say cloud services, let's say 1998 or 2000, that becomes more of a deep tech thing. At that point, today everybody is using it, but I'm sure at that point of time it was quite new, innovative. How does Amazon get that idea, or how does Amazon do that? They have a lot of computers with them, they use them to develop their systems. Now they have a lot of space, hard drives, physical storage space left with them, less use of those laptops. What do? They start to provide a service. Okay, we'll provide storage services using the memory that we have spare with us. So that is where Amazon Cloud develops from. So it's not as if that deep tech will come at the cost of consumer tech. This is a continuum. This is a continuous spectrum of things where we have something that leads to other, then something leads to other. You can't expect somebody to develop, let's say, some large language model from the scratch without any support system. Where does DeepSeek, or let's say Chinese counterpart to OpenAI, where does that develop? So we have some people in Chinese financial ecosystem which have developed some algorithms for fast trading. Again, they have spare computing power, talent obviously, plus spare computing power. They are thinking about, they're looking at these LLMs, OpenAI and all those things. Okay, why not let us also do it using the systems that we have? And that leads to a big breakthrough in form of DeepSeek. So it's not as if that deep tech will come, somebody would say, okay, from now onwards, no consumer tech, only deep tech. That's how it can't be. Both of them have to be together. And in fact, consumer tech would lead to incremental developments, which will produce some breakthrough in between. So deep tech doesn't come at a cost. Now, on to the other parts of your question. Two more examples I'll give. One was this Amazon and DeepSeek. Second one, Mr. Trump was shot at one of his rallies. And we all saw the video, and we saw that the sniper, the American Special Forces sniper, was wearing a helmet which had a camera mounted on top of that. It's an Indian startup, Edith Defense System, that has developed that camera. Now that system, that camera system mounted on top of the American soldier's helmet, they pitched it to Indian government also, Indian military. But I'm sure everybody understands how things move in Indian system. They were not given an opportunity, so they said, okay, let's simply go to other customers who are buying it. And this therefore, quote unquote, kills many startups over there. Why? Because they would like to score big orders initially. Who better to give them big orders than government? So yes, there is a dependency, there is a need, but at the same time, there has to be some willingness to take risks, as in, okay, if government is not giving me support, I must learn to move on to others. Chinese government is not, let's say, buying from Alibaba or is not buying from DeepSeek. They have created an ecosystem. Our startups or our businessmen can't think that government is the biggest buyer that will give me revenue. Government is not there to give you revenue. It is going to make sure that your clearances, your processes are in place, they are smooth. That is what the government has to do. So we must understand. I'm sure everybody knows Baba Kalyani of the Bharat Forge group. Bharat Forge is no startup. Bharat Forge, again, they pitched their guns, big guns, artillery guns to the government. Military did not pursue them. They said, okay, we are going to sell them to anybody else who needs them. Foreign countries now plugging the orders. So they say, if Indian government wants it, as an Indian army wants it, we are going to sell it to them. So again, we have to go beyond this kind of support that government is willing to bear the costs for me. Government will not bear your cost, will not bear your risks. You will have to take those costs. What does the government do? And that would be my concluding remark. Again, one example, semiconductors. Sir talked about semiconductors. It was in 1960s that we first thought of bringing semiconductor manufacturing to the country. And there have been many attempts by our government to encourage foreigners or Indian companies to bring in semiconductors. It is the first time that we have succeeded in an actual semiconductor manufacturing unit coming into the country, and many more are under construction. Who are constructing them? It is the big businesses, the pillars that I've talked about in the first part. They are the ones, Tatas are the ones who are, let's say, constructing those semiconductor plants. Now, once that is in place, then we can expect maybe somebody develops, because semiconductors will be available at a lesser cost, maybe more supply would be there. Maybe, just maybe somebody develops an LLM using some special case LLMs for that. So that is what leads to deep tech. So it's not consumer tech versus deep tech. It's all these things together in an ecosystem nurtured by the government, supported by the pillars of the economy, which results in all things happening at the same time. So I would say that there's no choice. We have an or situation. We have an and situation, not an or situation. This and this, not this or this.
I think we have very comprehensively covered the entire issue. So thank you, sirs. Now, dear viewers, as you saw, we very comprehensively analyzed the Indian startup ecosystem. We discussed the challenges the Indian startups are facing, but we ended on a very optimistic note. And we also got to know that deep tech startups are not going to come at the cost of the consumer driven startups. Rather, the normal trajectory is that one leads to the other. So we hope you enjoyed this session thoroughly. We'll keep coming up with more such themes. Till then, wish you all the very best.